Hey guys, Mike Missack with Jeeps on the Run. So today we're going to talk about the 4xe, and we're going to break this video down into a couple different sections. How does it drive, some technical details, what makes it a Jeep, as well as, I guess, the downsides. Might be a little lengthy of a video, so stick with us, watch the whole thing, or skip around and find the sections that work for you. I'm a Jeep enthusiast. I've owned YJs, CJs, CJ2As, Grand Cherokees, Wranglers. I've owned a gamut of vehicles over the entire driving career, I guess you could say. I'm also start by saying I'm generally not an advocate for, or have not been an advocate for, electric vehicles or hybrids or any of that technology up until now, mostly because electric and hybrid always kind of stand out as this goofy looking vehicle and doesn't really appeal to my lifestyle. When this came out, I was interested. It caught my attention and I had to know more. So I ended up being a buyer. We've owned this for about 3 weeks now, so we're going to walk through. I'm going to tell you some of the ins and outs, the details of it. If you're interested in buying one, this might be a good video to watch because this is real world, not getting paid to do this. This is a real world review and experience and how it fits our lifestyle. So let's dive right in. So one of the comments you get is, it's not a real Jeep. Real Jeeps you don't plug in, and I get it, right? That's the mindset, right? It's what we've known. We've never had a battery powered Jeep before. Let me tell you one thing too. The other comment you get is, well, you can't go anywhere. You can't go on road trips. It's hybrid. It's battery and electric. So it has both. You're never stuck. There's no charge anxiety. You're never stranded if the battery runs out of power. One thing that Jeep made sure they did first is that before this is anything, before this is a hybrid or an EV or whatever you want to call it, technically it's a plug-in hybrid vehicle. But before it's anything, it's a Jeep Wrangler. And they built it with that in mind. So the approach angles and departure angles are within a thousandth of an inch of the non-4xe models. So the Rubicon equals a Rubicon, the Sahara equals a Sahara, within fractions of an inch difference of approach angles. It still can ford the same amount of water, so that's the same. The batteries are put inside the vehicle. Any of the components that make this a 4xe, and we'll get into that in a minute, but any of those additional components are protected by skid plates. Again, this is a Jeep first and a hybrid vehicle second. Having said that, they didn't short out on any of the aspects of the hybrid vehicle either. This is the second most powerful Jeep ever produced. That is compared to the 392 Wrangler. This has more torque even than the diesel JL or Gladiator that's out. It's got 470 foot-pounds of torque and 375 horsepower. And the 470 foot-pounds of torque is instant. So if you're off-road and you're traveling up, you have that instant torque. You're not waiting for the V8 motor, which would be the only one that has comparable torque, to gain its RPMs. You've got instant torque. It's also got regenerative braking. Again, for off-road, when you're traversing down steep inclines, you almost don't even need to use brakes. It's still very, very, very capable of being off-roaded. Jeep has gone out and they're even putting charging stations at their trailheads. The driveline on this vehicle is almost identical to the standard JL or Gladiator as well. Front half of the transmission back, so your transfer case, your axles, you've got Dana 44 axles, you've got the same basically the same 8-speed transmission. Everything is the same from the transmission center of the transmission back. So driveline is all the same. If you were to get underneath the vehicle, you'll see some additional components, and we'll get into that. But generally speaking, it's still very much the same as a Wrangler. And you'd be very surprised when you get in this, short of the lack of engine noise, which at first seems disturbing, but it's almost addicting how quiet it is, and you hear these creaks and noises coming from the suspension that your JL probably makes now, but you never heard over your engine noise. Short of that, it truly drives like a Wrangler. You get in and you wouldn't know you're driving a hybrid vehicle. It drives like a Wrangler and it's very seamless, and we'll get into all those details in a minute. But the rebuttal is, it's not a Jeep. It's actually probably more powerful and more capable than the non-4xe JL. Now that we're under the hood, let's talk about some technical details. Under the hood, it's got the basic same 2.0 liter turbocharged motor that's been in the JL for a couple years now. What you will notice, your HVAC, your air conditioning system, is now electric, and you have, instead of an alternator, you have what's called almost a starter generator. You could look at it two ways. It's like an electric supercharger, basically. The electric supercharger does two things. It's valued for about 44 horsepower of the final drive total horsepower that's calculated, and it acts like a golf cart would. So it helps with this seamless transition between electric and gas. So just much like when you start a golf cart, you hit the accelerator, the starter generator starts the motor, and you start running. This works the same. If you're familiar with the JL start-stop system that is standard on the 6 and even the 2 liter non-4xe versions, you kind of have that abrasive, non-seamless transition between the motor not running and running at stoplight. It completely disappears in the 4xe. There is absolutely no noticeable transition between electric and gas, and most of it's thanks to this starter generator. That sets this hybrid apart from other hybrids that are not quite as seamless transition between electric and gas like this has. So it's also the reason that this vehicle can also charge back to the battery system if needed, or if that option is selected, and we'll get into those drive modes in a little bit. The vehicle is built on the same Dana 44 axles with the same 8-speed transmission that the normal JL has. Now, instead of a standard torque converter in this vehicle, that is where the electric motor is built, and it uses different clutches to engage that motor into this seamless drive combination of gas versus electric. So the motor, aside from this one on the belt driven, is built in the front end of the transmission where your standard torque converter would be located. So the inside of the 4xe is essentially the same as a standard JL. This model happens to be the high altitude. Right now the 4xe is only made in 3 models. It's made in the Sahara, the Rubicon, and the high altitude. Rumor is that it will start coming out in the Sport. Generally that's how Jeep does it. They start with their higher trim levels and then start working backwards. The only real difference you're going to notice visually inside the JL is under these back seats. If you flip them up, under here is where you have a 17.3 kilowatt hour batteries. So that's where they reside. They reside inside the vehicle. They are inside for a couple of reasons, right? Number one, this is a Jeep first, so it's watertight. They're safe. They're out of the elements. They're up here. Number two, one thing you should know about the battery is they are heated and cooled. So the comments are, well, what's your battery life going to be in the winter? And respectfully, it still may decrease as far as mileage goes in the winter, but they're climate controlled. So they are heated and they are cooled for optimal efficiency. These batteries drive the 134 horsepower motor that's embedded inside the front of the transmission. The other thing we should mention is we did talk about the driveline being the same throughout. From that point back, this vehicle can still be flat-toed, just like it has traditionally in the past as well. There still is a normal 12-volt battery under the hood. This specific model has the auxiliary switches in place, so you can add auxiliary lighting, everything else just like you would on previous non-4xe models. And there is a lift kit available for the 4xe. So again, Jeep has made sure that this is a Jeep first and then a hybrid second. The HVAC system is quite a bit different than the standard JL. It is all driven from the battery. So you do have instant AC and almost instant heat, regardless of if the engine's running on gas or electric. So even when you remote start your vehicle, it basically wakes everything up and runs the HVAC system from the battery. Now, there is a heat box passenger side. There's a heater element on the passenger side underneath the vehicle that drives the heat. That is covered by a skid plate for protection. It does show you how much power that system is using when you're in hybrid mode or gas mode. And we'll jump into that when we talk about how this vehicle drives. So let's talk about how does this vehicle drive? How does it feel different than a standard JL? Jeep did a really nice job with this one. If you jumped in it, short of it being eerily quiet, It drives very much like a standard JL. I actually think it drives nicer because I personally hate the start-stop feature that's standard on the JLs and Gladiators. While this motor does start and stop, it happens seamlessly because it doesn't actually ever use a traditional starter like the standard JL does. It uses the starter generator that we talked about earlier, and that transition is truly seamless. You have to look down at the gauges to determine what you're running on, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So there's 3 modes. You have hybrid, electric, and e-save. And on a side note, that's how you open your fuel system. So when it's in hybrid, the Jeep will use its computer system to determine the most optional motor to run in. Generally speaking, if you don't drive the Jeep aggressively, it will always start out in just electric. If you're looking for that full 470 foot-pounds of torque and you really get on it aggressively, you're going to notice 2 things happen. You're going to notice the electric kick in as well as the gas motor, and you're going to really feel that this Jeep pull away from you. The acceleration and the power is incredible under full throttle. If you drive this conservatively in hybrid mode, you really won't see that gas engine kick in unless it's out of battery power. The next is electric. On the dash it says it's an electric mode, it's going to save fuel for later use. So what that does is it's really going to funnel all of the engine's resources just to electric. Now I have noticed even in full electric mode, if you really get on it and you really try and drive aggressive, gas engine will kick in, but I would say it's electric heavy in electric mode. You really have to try to get that gas engine to kick in. The next mode is e-save. Now this does two things. So it started the engine because we're already running, right? And in e-save, what it's going to do is it's going to save all the electric. I'm just going to put it on hybrid so it'll turn back off. It'll save all the battery power until you get to your destination. So let's say you want to save your battery power to go off-road or to go down a trail and be nice and quiet and not have that battery running or the engine running. You can save that battery power until later. In e-save mode, you can also have the engine through that starter generator we talked about earlier, or that electric supercharger that's mounted to the motor. You can have that feed power back into the batteries and be charging on your road trip. In my head, doesn't make a lot of sense as far as why would you use the gas motor to charge back to your electric to use electric again. I think there's too many conversions there as far as being economical, and I'll show you how you can pick when you're in e-save what that mode actually does. The other thing this vehicle does is it has a max regeneration mode. You click that button right there, it'll come up on your screen here and tell you max regeneration mode. What that does is as soon as you let off the throttle, the accelerator, you'll feel a restriction. You'll feel a resistance pulling back on you. And that's using the motor. It's almost like an engine brake, if you will, but it's taking that energy and it's putting it back into the battery. This system technically says you get about 22 miles, and I'll get into that on full battery. With regeneration mode, what we've noticed is even when the battery is fully diminished and it says you have less than 1% left, even from dead stops, you will start on electric only. Or coming down hills, you'll notice the gas engine shut off, and it's using that regenerative power. So you're making a little bit of power back on the battery, and again, even when this battery is dead, there is still a gain in being a hybrid. There is still gains there from this regenerative braking mode. You almost can drive this Jeep as soon as you get used to it without ever using the brakes. Now the regenerative braking mode, once you reach about 3 miles an hour, you'll feel it let go. At that point, you do have to hold the brake to bring it to a complete stop or to stop it from rolling back. There is hill assist. We'll get into that later. 2 huge benefits is you're putting electric back into the battery, and you're really saving on your brakes. The reality is I hardly would foresee having to do brake job on this vehicle in 100,000 miles. You'll truly notice you're not using your brakes when you drive this vehicle. So on your infotainment system, you've got this new hybrid screen. It shows you how much battery is being used, how much your engine power is either using or charging back, and it shows you what your climate system is using. So if I turn on the AC here, if you look at the screen here, you'll see the little HVAC light right there. That's telling you that you have power going from from your battery to your HVAC system, right? And you've also got power going from your battery to your motor. Now, when we start driving, I'll just show you in a minute, you can see where the power is going from, how much is being used, and when you're regenerative, it'll show you how much power is coming back into the motor. So we're gonna take you for a little ride. A few things that you should notice is, with the extra about 500 pounds centered in the back seat, you'll actually notice that the 4xe I think rides a little nicer than a standard JL. And I have not driven the 392 yet, but rumor is the 392 feels very nose heavy with a big V8 in the front. The 4xe actually is supposed to corner better, handle better around corners, and just have an overall sure-footed feel because of the extra weight that is centered versus up in the nose. The other thing you should notice is, so right now the vehicle is off, and I'm gonna be quiet here for a minute, but I'm gonna turn the vehicle on. Now this is the only, if there was a downside of the vehicle, this is it. I guess compared to a 392, you don't have the Hemi roar. It's almost so quiet that it becomes addictive. And you'll hear noises that your other JL probably made that you never heard over the engine. So we are on, and we're ready to go. I'm going to turn this on this e-hybrid screen so you can see what's happening. So right now I'm in full hybrid mode. I'm going to turn this regenerative braking on, and so it will show you how much use we're using from the battery, the engine. Now when this one goes negative, that tells you that we're putting power back into the battery system. Your tachometer on the left, that's for your engine, just as you normally had. Instead of your speedometer on the right here, you've got a couple other gauges. It shows you the percent of power, and it also shows you charge. So when you're on electric only, this gauge shows you how much power you're using. If it goes down, it shows how much power you're putting back into the system. So that's almost your tachometer, if you will, your gauge, your voltmeter of the battery system. Step on this and be aggressive and show you what happens when you give it full power. You'll see the battery go to 100, and you'll see the tachometer comes on, the motor comes into play. Now as soon as I let off the gas, you feel the resistance, and the battery shows it's charging, and we've got negative 28 kilowatt hours up here, so we're putting power back into our battery system. Now back on the gas, the regenerative braking goes away, and you notice, without even feeling it, that the gas engine has turned off. If you drive it conservatively, that motor will really never turn on until the battery is dead unless needed. Now again, if you drive it aggressively and you want that extra power, it automatically kicks into place. And then once it's not needed, it will turn back off. So back on this, it's showing us that we're using the battery power, and it's transferring that power to the wheels. Now if you go to 4-wheel drive, it's going to show you you're in transferring the power to all 4 wheels. This specific model has the automatic 4-wheel drive system. There are different transfer cases available, but at least shows you to where your power is actually going to. This is going to be a 0 to 60. You've got 470 foot-pounds of torque, and it's incredible. So you'll notice after the hard acceleration, the gas engine turned off. I'm still on electric power. It will truly draw that power when it's needed, and the transition, I can't stress enough, is seamless. I hated the auto start system on the standard V6 or even the standard gas 2-liter motor without the 4xe. This is, it's noiseless. You don't hear a starter. You truly don't, unless you look at these gauges to see what that system's doing, or you look at this hybrid system, you truly don't know that it's switching between gas and electric. It is truly seamless. And again, Jeep did a really nice job with that. And on the side note, this just drives like a Jeep. You don't have to think about what you're doing. You don't have to do anything differently. It's a Jeep first, it's a hybrid second, but they did a really nice job. Next, we're going to talk about charging, what works best to charge, and we'll wrap it up with a 3-week review. Let's talk about charging the Jeep. So Jeep says about 22 miles. In real world, we're actually seeing close to 30. And even when it's dead, like I talked about before, we're still seeing some advantages of the regenerative braking and some electric assists pulling away from stoplights and stop signs. So even when it's dead, we're noticing it, and we're right now in our environment, we're getting closer to that 30 miles versus the 25, that 22 that Jeep is saying. Here's where you charge. It's a nice metal door. It's done well, seems built well. You've got a weatherproof cap here, and you'll plug in. Indicator light, and there's a little indicator here. It tells you what those lights mean, as well as up on the dash you've got an indicator light that tells you how much progress your vehicle has charged. This Jeep will come with a level 1 charger, which will plug into any standard 110 outlet, and so when you plug it in here, it's probably going to light up, says it's plugged in, and that's going to turn red because we're not plugged in, so you're going to get an error. What I will tell you about this level 1 charger, works great. Plug it in wherever you go family, friend's house, whatever the case, you can charge it. The reality of it is this is an overnight charger. It takes about 14 hours from a dead battery to a full charge with this charger. Jump to a level 2 charger, 220 charger. You can get them on Amazon, you can get them from Jeep, you can get them from various different places. They range in price from $400 to $1,000. Some are probably just that cheap Amazon chargers, and some are probably better. They have different features. Some are Alexa enabled, some are Bluetooth enabled. It'll tell you the cost. So there's various features of them. Regardless, at the end of the day, all of them will likely bring that charge time from 14 hours down to about 2. For us, how that changed is we do a lot of short trips. If we get home from a 15-mile trip, we can plug in, and 2 hours later, we're going to take another trip, go to the store. We're back to full electric. For us, that's how our 53 miles to the gallon came to be the equation, because we plug in and we can get a full charge again in 2 hours for our next trip. With this, you're not going to have that. You're going to be waiting for the next day. If you drive your car to and from work and you don't go anywhere else, this is probably fine because you're going to have that 14-hour lag time anyway. For our lifestyle, we don't have that lag time, so the stage 2, level 2 charger definitely increased our mile per gallon usage on the 4xe. When you have a charger plugged in here, the Jeep is smarter than we are. Whether the hood's open or this is plugged in, you cannot put your vehicle in gear. You can't drive away with your charger still plugged into the wall. So that's good to know. Someone probably tried to figure it out. Someone probably already tried that. Can't do it. You can actually schedule the charge time. So if you live in an area where your electric is a cheaper rate, say after midnight, through either your phone app or through the infotainment system on the radio, you can schedule your charge time on when you want this to take the charge. It'll be plugged in, it'll show it's ready to go. There's an indicator light on here. At the set time, the Jeep says, all right, I'm ready to accept the charge. So there's a few app-based programs that can help you. There's a Mopar phone app that you can schedule your charging system from. It tells you the health of your battery, tells you the health of your Jeep, gives you a bunch of cool information. You can do that all right from your phone. There's another app, and I'm sure there's many of them, but there's an app called PlugShare. And I've never owned one of these before. I've never really paid attention. But if you pay attention, under your nose, grocery stores, Walgreens, Myers, there are free charging stations. For example, my wife commutes about 30 miles one way to work. On her way home, she often stops and picks up groceries, whatever the case. Stops at Myers. Guess what? She plugs in for free. Free charge, she drives the rest of her way home on electric. So pay attention to your route. Maybe you'll end up shopping somewhere different because they have a plug that's free. I know a lot of the grocery stores by us have them. So this is the level 2 charger that I've installed in my garage. Same plug. You'll notice the difference in the cable, right? It's triple the thickness of your standard level 1 charger. Obviously, you've got a lot more voltage going through here, but this is a standard 220 charger. Plugs in the same way. Everything operates the same. The two things you're going to notice is the speed of the charge goes from 14 to literally 2, and those indicator lights we talked about on the dash, when they blink about triple the speed. So those actually ramp up in speed as well, showing it's charging a little faster. Again, this is the one I chose. There are many different ones you can choose from. I was lucky. I had a 220 outlet here next to my compressor. I tapped in off of that. Highly recommend. If you don't know what you're doing, this is definitely something for a professional to install. You could damage your vehicle, you can burn down your house. So if you don't know how to install one, have it done professionally. When you're shopping for these and you live in a cold climate, that I would pay attention to is the review on the cord. I have a feeling come winter, granted we keep this in the garage, normally it's heated, but I have a feeling in the winter, in cold weather, this cord is going to be a tough one to wind up. So I know some of the chargers have better quality cords than others for cold weather, so it's something to keep in mind. But again, this just plugs into the Jeep, and then when it's in storage, that's the charger we chose. Any level 2 chargers will likely work, but you spend X amount of money on a Jeep, I wouldn't cheap out on a charger. So we've owned the 4xe for about 3 weeks now. My overall impression of it is an A+. I would consider myself an anti-electric vehicle person. I'd consider an anti-hybrid person. It's in the hobby of burning gas, so big into power sports. So I would consider myself not the general person that would be interested in this vehicle. So you can kind of put that in the back of your head. Overall, I'm super impressed. The one thing I didn't talk about was towing. I've towed with this Wrangler. The instant torque with a trailer behind you is crazy. You pull out of traffic with a trailer and that torque, that's when it really shines. So I have not wheeled with the vehicle yet. I imagine up an incline, that electric torque would be crazy. Put 1 tank of fuel in this in the 3 weeks we've had it. Again, it worked out to be about 53, 54 miles per gallon. Now I know what the argument's going to be. If I get in and I drive it to Florida, it's not going to be that 54 miles to the gallon. No argument at all. It's not going to be worse than what you have now. We traded an 18 JL in for this. So for me, if I still take my one road trip and I get my 18, 19 miles to the gallon, great. That's what I was getting before. So that's not kind of what it's about for me. But in a daily lifestyle, when I normally use it, we went from 18 miles to the gallon normally to the 53 miles to the gallon. Now I know the other rebuttal is going to be, well, what's the electric bill going to be? Well, it's a good question. 2 things to keep in mind. With the fast charger, it's only charging for 2 hours. I understand it's at a higher amperage rate. I don't have a good feel for that yet. A lot of things happened when we purchased this. We've got a hot tub that normally runs all winter. That's probably not running as hard now. And the week we bought it, it was 100 degrees and we had the air conditioning on. So I don't have a good feel for the cost of it yet. I do have friends who have Teslas, and those obviously being all electric certainly have a much higher charge rate than this ever will. And their worst was an extra $50 a month. So I really don't see a significant change in electric bill. Well, I will see a significant change at the fuel pump. So the other thing we noticed, we talked about it briefly, even when the battery is dead, we still are noticing gains. We're still noticing electric assist. You're still getting power from that regenerative braking. So even with a dead battery, there's still a definite savings that adds to that 53 miles to the gallon. As far as downfalls go on this Jeep, really honestly, the only thing I would say is a downfall would be the noise. And the reality of that is I don't even know that's a downfall. That would probably only be a downfall if you're going to truly compare this to the 392 SRT Wrangler. You push that start button, you get that V8 rumble, you get that awesome power noise, right? The noise of a standard JL, standard V6, I mean, it's not like that motor sounds good, in my opinion. So I don't even know if you would call that a downfall as much as it just feels totally different and unnatural. But now to the point where maybe you almost like it. So I'm really trying to find a downfall, and I can't. Their downfall might be is you find yourself driving it trying to stretch that fuel economy or trying to stretch that regenerative braking. You might come down a hill and just really eat up that regenerative power. So I find myself driving it differently, not using all that 470 foot-pounds of torque and 375 horsepower. I drive it differently because it's like this challenge. How far can I make this battery go? Big fans. I give it an A+. We purchased this at Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram. They also hooked me up with the level 2 charger. A+. They've got a few in stock. They've sold a few more. So if you're looking for one, Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Fox Lake. Highly recommend it. And again, if you're a Jeep enthusiast like myself, check us out on Facebook, jeepsontherun.com, or a great group there. And we do some great charity events as well. If you got any questions, I'd love to hear your comments. But again, those who say this is not a real Jeep, check out, do your homework. They're actually, the only Jeep they compare this to is a 392 V8, and I think we'd all would venture to say that a V8 Wrangler is definitely a real Jeep, and that's the only comparison to this one right now. So I really thank you guys for watching. Hit the subscribe button. Thanks again, and if you got any questions, shoot us a message below.